We've got a packed show as well. And welcome to Hannity. Terror strikes Pennsylvania over the weekend. A vile anti-Semitic racist murdering 11 people, injuring 6 more during what is literally a baby naming ceremony at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Hate crime charges have been filed against the monster responsible, who should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. And predictably and sadly tonight, without skipping a beat, the mainstream media and their friends on the left are once again twisting the tragedy and literally rushing to politicize the tragedy. Now, when we thought it couldn't get any worse, well, they're now blaming President Trump for the senseless actions of a madman who actually hates President Trump. And we're going to show you the most despicable coverage of the weekend's attacks, including a new low for CNN and Humpty Dumpty. And we're also going to call out a glaring double standard in the media surrounding the Democratic Party, their love fest with radical, racist, anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan and others. And with just 8 days to go until the midterms, we have a brand new undercover Project Veritas video. We will debut it right here on this show, showing just how radical, and we always knew she was radical, Arizona Senate candidate Kristen Sinema really is. And we'll give you updates on so many of the races across the country, so many important elections. They are neck and neck as we now head towards the finish line. It's your choice this election, not the media's, not the pollsters. All right, sit tight. A lot of news. Time for our breaking news opening monologue. All right, the face of evil, sadly, once again rearing its ugly head. Over the weekend, a despicable anti-Semite named Robert Bowers opened fire inside a Pittsburgh synagogue, killing 11, wounding 6 other innocent people. Among the victims were 2 siblings, a primary physician, a husband, a wife, who were killed in the very same synagogue where they were married more than 60 years ago. This is the deadliest attack against the Jewish community on American soil in our history. President Trump immediately condemned this heinous act of evil over the weekend. Let's take a look.
This evil anti-Semitic attack is an assault on all of us. It's an assault on humanity. The scourge of anti-Semitism cannot be ignored, cannot be tolerated, and it cannot be allowed to continue. We can't allow it to continue. It must be confronted and condemned everywhere it rears its very ugly head. Through the centuries, the Jews have endured terrible persecution, and you know that. We've all read it, we've studied it. They've gone through a lot. And those seeking their destruction, we will seek their destruction.
Their destruction. The president's right. Evil, anti-Semitic, racists have no place in this country, and perhaps no president in modern history has demonstrated more support for Israel, the Jewish people, than President Trump. It starts with a personal connection. His daughter Ivanka, his son-in-law Jared, both are Jewish. His grandchildren also Jewish. As president, he deported a known Nazi death camp guard even after President Obama failed to do so. And he is the most pro-Israel president since, well, the UN partition plan 1947-48, even moving, finally, the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to its rightful capital, Jerusalem, a promise made by many past presidents, never fulfilled. Israeli Prime Minister, well, Bibi Netanyahu just thanked President Trump for his leadership in a condolence letter to the Pittsburgh community and the Jewish community in America. Also, Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer, he had this to say. Let's take a look.
I have to tell you, Victor, I've been following anti-Semitism all of my adult life. I have never heard a stronger statement than the statement the President of the United States made yesterday. He said at his rally in Illinois that if you are going to try to destroy the Jewish people, we're going to destroy you. I've never heard a non-Israeli figure anywhere, not a European leader, not an American president, ever say such a strong statement condemning anti-Semitism.
And it was the right thing to do for the president. Now, despite what you just saw from Ron Dermer and what you heard from the prime minister, of course, the mainstream media, Democratic Party, they are now speaking with one voice, literally condemning President Trump for this weekend's horrific attack. In Washington, in the Washington Post, Dana Milbank writing, quote, Trump's America is not a safe place for Jews. Also in the Post, an editor writing that Trump has, quote, stoked the fears of those like Bauer. And according to a columnist in the New York Times, quote, Trump has flirted with the deepest racists and Nazis, and it has not gone unnoticed, least of all by them. This is beyond despicable, beyond low, beyond disgusting. Obviously, in the lead up to an election, not only is President Trump historically supportive of the Jewish community in Israel, but the monster responsible for Saturday's act, they tend to omit this, of terror, actually hated Donald Trump. Why? In large part for being so close to our closest friends and allies in Israel. Robert Bauer's postings online about his contempt for the president and the fact that he has this close alliance with Israel. Still, the mainstream media's coverage, it was even worse on air as they tried to spike some type of political football over a story that is so serious, so horrific. Fake news CNN, a GQ correspondent on their network, actually said President Trump was worse than ISIS. Watch this.
I think, this president, one of the things that he really launched his presidential run on is talking about Islamic radicalization. And this president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did. I think the president has far more supporters who espouse an equally hateful ideology.
And CNN fake news president Jeff Zucker is lecturing the president on rhetoric, civility. Now, she has since claimed her remarks were, quote, exaggerated. This is the kind of hateful, absurd rhetoric. It's nonstop. All weekend on CNN, fake news, conspiracy TV, MSNBC. Take a look.
Tweeting about baseball or talking about his bad hair day there, that was done intentionally to send a message to white nationalists. This doesn't bug me that much.
These aren't dog whistles at this point. They're bullhorns.
Anti-Semitic comments, anti-Semitic tropes seem to follow him everywhere.
He has an obligation to try to rid us of much of this tribalism. And I think what he's done over the course of the last few years is help foment this.
The president has not been dabbling in eliminationist rhetoric. At some points, he doesn't dog whistle. He uses megaphones to tell these tribes that they belong to him. And this is leading to violence directly.
How do you marry this situation where the president last week says he's a nationalist? All he had to do is say white nationalist to that.
He does have to take some responsibility for the type of racist bioclimate that we find ourselves in.
The president's obviously a racist. He's obviously a demagogue. He obviously condones anti-Semitism, stokes up nationalist hatred.
Now, remember, this comes after days of the media's quest to pin the mail bomb scare on President Trump. Again, politicizing tragedy, something that all Americans should be united on. Take a look.
Evil lurks in the hearts of men, and it does, and what Trump has tapped into is evil. This has now become a struggle about good versus evil, and the President of the United States is evil.
He created the atmosphere where a sick person, a criminal, somebody like this terrorist would actualize Trump's clear intent.
That sounds like he's not condemning the bomber. It sounds to me like he's partnering with him.
The president's inflammatory and violent rhetoric inspires these murderers and bad guys.
Trump is evil, partnering with the attempted bombing. And that brings us, by the way, to fake news CNN's Humpty Dumpty himself. That basically is CNN's poster boy and pretty much the stenographer for Jeff Zucker, Brian Stelter, over the weekend. He and a guest from the Washington Post tossing around an idea that this show, Hannity, responsible for violent actions of a deranged individual. Now we're crossing into legal territory. Take a look.
Margaret, you wrote about this week with regards to the bomb attacks, these suspicious packages. You said, look at all his targets. This reads like a list of Sean Hannity's pre-broadcast crib notes. That was the way you put it in your Washington Post column. Again, are you blaming the Hannitys of the world?
Well, I think they have a share of sort of this, revving up of hatred.
What you're hearing from Jeff Zucker, Humpty Dumpty, fake news CNN, other members of the mainstream media, this is crossing lines into slander. This is libelous. And by the way, with obvious malice. They refuse to tell the truth about what my loud positions have been against all violence, purposely lying about my positions over and over again. Go back to the Kavanaugh hearings. It's been me calling for security of every American, regardless of their political opinions, constantly denouncing violent actions. You have heard me say this a million times. America's issues must be addressed at the ballot box, saying over and over again, and I posted the tapes on Hannity.com when Barack Obama was president, we must protect America's presidents. And by the way, I even said I would physically defend CNN reporters or anyone else if I saw any physical act of aggression against them. And I meant it. You know, if you call out lies, call fake news for what it is, if you point out a political agenda under the guise of so-called news, that is not a call for violence. It is a simple, fundamental truth the media doesn't want to hear. There's a reason the American people are chanting, CNN sucks. They're earning that chant where they're literally minute by minute, second by second, 24/7 hatred of all things Trump. And, of course, the media is purposely lying, and it's downright reckless. It's irresponsible. You know what? If something happened to me, think about that, or another Fox News employee. By that twisted standard and paradigm, they would be held responsible. And with all due respect to a lot of people, I've likely had more threats against me in my career than any one of them. Real threats to me, to my family, to people that work for me. And today, during an interview with Laura Ingraham, which will air in the next hour right after this show, President Trump responded to the media's blame game, and here's what he said. Take a look.
You put bomb in quotes. They went crazy over that, too, over the weekend, because you used the word bomb in quotes.
Look at it.
Would you like to kind of...
No, look, he was insane a long time before you look at his medical records. He was insane for a long time. Bernie Sanders had a fan who shot a very good friend of ours, Steve Scalise, and other people. He was a total maniac. Nobody puts his name in the headline, Bernie Sanders in the headline.
Now, not only is the media's blame game a disgusting example of gutter politics at its worst, it's also an example of a shameful double standard. While the media, their friends on the left, predictably vilify everyone on the right, and they say nothing about top Democrats. We were like a lone voice here when Democrats and their connections to some of the most despicable, racist, anti-Semites in America today. Let's go for one example. Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, a virulent, racist, anti-Semite. Here's what Farrakhan thinks about the Jewish people. Take a look.
Here the Jews don't like Farrakhan, so they call me Hitler. Well, that's a good name. Hitler was a very great man. The satanic Jews, they control everything and mostly everybody. There were many Israelis and Zionist Jews in key roles in the 9/11 attacks. See, the Jews have control over those agencies of government. The powerful Jews are my enemy. Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off of that satanic Jew. Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
Now, that disgusting hate monger, racist, anti-Semite, has been revered by many top Democrats. Here he is, smiling, posing for a picture with former President Barack Obama. By the way, prior to Obama's run for president, this photo was purposefully hidden from we, the people, for 8 years when Obama was president. And just a few weeks ago, Farrakhan actually appeared on stage. This is a few weeks ago. Look who's there. Bill Clinton, beloved by the Democratic Party. Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson. Then there's the DNC deputy chairman, Minnesota candidate for attorney general, Keith Ellison. He once reportedly worked for Farrakhan and allegedly met with the hate preacher several times since. Now, sadly, the Democrats' radical ties don't stop at Farrakhan. There's the far-left activist, Linda Sarsour. She actually issued public support for the Muslim Brotherhood. Sharia law praised also Farrakhan's Nation of Islam. And she blamed the Jewish, quote, media for her negative image. And despite this, she was honored by the Obama White House as a champion of change in 2011. And more recently, she introduced Democratic Senator Kristen Gillibrand of New York at a rally. By the way, you won't hear about any of this from the mainstream media. Why? Well, it's 8 days before an election. The media desperately wants the Democratic Party to win the midterms. They want Trump to lose. The gloves for them are off. There's nothing they will not say or do to help the Democrats win. They have a political agenda. They always have. Since day one, they've hated Trump. The day he came down the escalator. They'll stop at nothing to vilify those they disagree with while shielding all of those they support. This is the same reason you won't hear about the constant stream of violent acts that we have covered on this program, carried out by left-wing mobs against conservatives. By the way, CNN says you can't call them mobs. And recently, gunshots were actually fired into a Florida GOP campaign office. Thank God no one was hurt. And meanwhile, also in Florida, a man there has just been arrested for threatening to kill a Republican congressman. At a rally for Republican Senate candidate Marsha Blackburn with Lindsey Graham this weekend, multiple members of the left's angry mob dragged out by security after trying to derail her event. And in the lead up to the midterms, so many serious acts of violence and incivility have been documented. 2 local Republicans punched in Minnesota, one a woman, another cold cock from behind, had a concussion. GOP campaign manager in Nevada was also assaulted. Threatening packages purportedly containing ricin were sent to, let's see, President Trump, Secretary of Defense Mattis, FBI Director Wray, CIA Director Haspel. We know what happened with the president's son, Don Jr. He was targeted with a suspicious package sent to his home, forcing his ex-wife to become hospitalized. A truck with a Trump bumper sticker, well, that was set on fire. And so many prominent Republicans have been run out of restaurants, airports, and more. And I've almost been saying daily and nightly, all of this has got to stop. While every person definitely is responsible for his or her own actions, we've been calling for calm, peace, security. Americans can settle their differences at the ballot box in 8 days. Violence is not an acceptable answer to any political disagreement. By the way, Hillary says we can't be civil. Eric Holder says kick them. And we've had far worse. What? Maxine Waters saying create a crowd, follow them into restaurants, department stores, grocery stores. Create a crowd, tell them they're not wanted anywhere anymore. 8 days from now, we, the people, have a chance to settle your differences in a peaceful, democratic way. And tonight we have so many updates from so many important races around the country, including even more shocking developments out of Arizona tonight. Remember, we first showed you Democratic Senate hopeful Kristen Sinema calling Arizona the meth lab of democracy, calling Arizonans who she wants to vote for her crazy, that the state was famous, but only in a Lindsay Lohan kind of way. She once said it was okay for Americans to go fight with the Taliban after 9/11. Arizona, think about that tonight. And Sinema even once promoted an event at Arizona State University featuring a radical lawyer who represented the blind sheikh. And meanwhile, Martha McSally, her Republican opponent, 28 years of service, 6 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, while Sinema was leading, as, quote, McSally said, anti-war protesters with a pink tutu on. And now it gets even worse. We have tonight exclusively video from ProjectVeritas.com. Sinema campaign staffers caught on tape openly admitting just how far left she really is, and they're now hiding it from the voters in Arizona. Just take a look at the footage. You decide.
I mean, I think you have to look, and this is why Kirsten's approach is so, I think, important. We can't be talking about an assault weapons ban. No. We can't, right?
But there's a lot of very conservative people in Arizona, and so she can't alienate the conservative or moderate conservative voters by being super she is pro-choice, she's very liberal, she's progressive.
Right.
But she doesn't, in this election, want to draw too much attention to being progressive because she's trying to be more. That's why I think she took so much Democratic help, too. Otherwise, she wouldn't have won, also.
She had to play centrist to move up, to become powerful.
I believe that we should offer citizenship to every person who's in this country who isn't bad. Like, you know, if you haven't committed a bad crime, you know, then you should have citizenship. That's what I believe.
Somehow polls show Sinema still neck and neck with McSally. The people of Arizona need to ask themselves, who do you want representing you? A war hero who supports the president, put her life on the line for her country and for all of you in Arizona? Or somebody that thinks it's okay to join the Taliban and thinks you're crazy? A radical left-wing activist who with far left views and clearly a hatred for the people of our own state. This is the most radical crop of Democrats to ever seek elected office. There are no more moderates. Remember, Claire McCaskill, Missouri, now pretending she was caught on tape, admitting support for widespread gun restrictions by Project Veritas, taking a very different public stance. Thankfully, Republican Josh Hawley is now surging. Tennessee Republican Marsha Blackburn picking up momentum over Democrat Phil Bredesen after people working for him said that he was just lying to the people of Tennessee about his support for Kavanaugh. And his campaign referred to people in Tennessee as ignorant, the people they want voting for him. North Dakota, Heidi Heitkamp, also caught by Project Veritas on tape. Her campaign admitting on video that while she campaigned as a moderate, she, like every other Democrat, she's really just another far-left Schumer senator. And other Republicans are also gaining momentum around the country. Look at West Virginia. Patrick Morrisey, now a 2-point lead against incumbent Joe Manchin. Remember, Joe was against the tax cuts, supports Obamacare. John James in Michigan, now a chance. It's outside, but he was down 20. He's only down 6 against Debbie Stabenow. And if you look at Republican Rick Scott, he's tied neck and neck, 46 each, with Bill Nelson down in Florida. Governor Scott has been great for the state of Florida. He will join us tonight along with Ron DeSantis, who's running for governor. Meanwhile, Republican Mike Braun in Indiana, he is now beginning to build a lead over incumbent Democrat Joe Donnelly. If you're in Indiana, remember, a vote for the Libertarian is pretty much a vote for Donnelly. And Democrat John Tester, he's feeling heat in Montana, still holds a slight lead. And even Democrat Bob Menendez is in the fight for his life, believe it or not, in New Jersey. Granted, it's an outside shot, but he's within the margin of error. The New York Post now releasing a blistering editorial telling voters to oust this corrupt senator. And over in the House, according to Real Clear Politics, Republicans now are projected to keep at least 200 seats. Democrats 205. That means Republicans are down. That means control of the House and whether Nancy Pelosi becomes Speaker comes down to 30 toss-up states, and most toss-ups are being held by Republicans. I've listed them all at Hannity.com. So we're 8 days away from the midterms. That balance of power rests in your hands. Democratic Party, their agenda is what? Impeach the president. They want their crumbs back, rescind the tax cuts. They want Obamacare. How did that work out for you? They want to block Supreme Court nominees. They want open borders. They want to eliminate ICE sanctuary cities. And by the way, launch every investigation into Trump that they could ever think of. Tonight, there are 3 potential outcomes. Republicans can maintain control of both the House and pick up seats in the Senate. That's option 1. Option 2, Republicans, it will be a split decision. Nancy Pelosi can become Speaker, but Republicans pick up seats in the Senate. Finally, the final outcome is the Democrats could take both the House and Senate. Pelosi and Schumer leading the way. God help us if it's the latter. You have the power to shock the world. When we come back, Sean Spicer, Matt Schlapp, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz reacting to my opening monologue and much more. Stay with us. A lot of breaking news straight ahead.
The president and make him responsible for these ridiculous acts. That is outrageous. That would be the very first reaction of so many people across this country. I'm not finished. The only person responsible for carrying out either of these heinous acts were the individuals who carried them out. It's not the president, no more than it was Bernie Sanders' fault for the individual who shot up a baseball field of congressional Republicans. You can't start putting the responsibility of individuals on anybody but the individual who carries out the crime.
That was White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders criticizing rightly the media for trying to tie President Trump to the horrendous, vicious anti-Semitic shootings in Pittsburgh and the mail bomb scare. Are they that desperate? Here with reaction. American First Action Senior Advisor Sean Spicer, American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp, Florida Republican congressional candidate Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz. And by the way, Colonel Waltz has been active at the Florida GOP office that had gunshots fired into it over the weekend. Michael, tell us what happened down there.
Well, apparently someone decided to shoot up the local party headquarters, where I also have a campaign office. I was just speaking there last week, and the podium and the wall where I was speaking is now riddled with bullets, Sean. So this is personal. Campaign volunteers had just left before this happened. And I got to tell you, as a combat veteran, you know, this is what we deal with over in the third world, over in places all over the world. You know, in America, we resolve our political differences with debate, with votes, not with guns and bombs. And Sean, this is why we need, in my view, more combat veterans in office on both sides of the aisle, because, you know, we have perspective. Our enemies have names like Osama bin Laden and like Mullah Omar, you know, not names like Nancy or Chuck. You know, we understand who the real enemies of the United States are, and this is no way to resolve our political differences. This has to stop.
You know, and Sean Spicer, I never blamed Bernie Sanders. As a matter of fact, I went out of my way to say he's not responsible for what one of his supporters did on that ball field. And I was clear when Obama was president, when somebody walked into the White House and literally didn't get caught. We've got to protect our president. And I agreed with very little politically with Obama.
You're right, but you also have been very clear that anybody who wants to use violence or any type of threatening activity as a way to get their means is not something that you found acceptable. You've even gone so far as to talk about protecting other journalists from networks that are your rivals.
By the way, Jim Acosta, I said I'd jump in and defend him if anyone laid a hand on him. I don't particularly like him, but it's the right thing to do. Because somebody chants fake news that's not a call for violence. It's a calling out of their horrible coverage.
Right, and what troubles me right now, Sean, is that there was a tremendous tragedy that was experienced in Pittsburgh just a few days ago. There was another tragedy when so many of these individuals, albeit on the other side of the aisle, had threatening pipe bombs set to them. I can't imagine the level of anxiety and concern that puts those individuals and their family. This should be a time of healing. This should be a time of concern. Instead, we see this finger pointing, mostly in the direction of President Trump, trying to figure out how much blame we can assign to him, as opposed to comforting those who were injured or who lost loved ones in Pittsburgh. This should be a time when we come together as America and talk about how great we are as a country. I've heard that rabbi make so many great statements about what a great country we are and how his synagogue is going to be a better place for it.
He gave a beautiful prayer today. I will say that.
Yeah. He did. And that's who we are as a country. It's about the people who rushed to the scene, not that horrible individual that shot it up. And yet we're talking too much about the media and their role in assigning blame than those who suffered a loss.
But it's despicable. The rush to look, they hate Trump on these networks every second, every minute, every hour of every day. And then they can't understand why they get criticized. It's warranted. That's why. You know, Matt, look, for example, you know, the media only cares about Russia collusion, not about Hillary's bought and paid for dossier used to lie to commit frauds on FISA courts and influence an election. They only care about Kavanaugh 40 years ago, but not about Keith Ellison or Bill Clinton. And similarly, you know, all these people that have been, you know, attacked in restaurants by mobs, they were virtually silent. So their hypocrisy is on display.
Well, I know what it's like because I go on some of these networks and some of these shows, and I will tell you, Sean, that the American people are fair and they see through this. If you look at the polls, you know, some of these media personalities like to talk about the president's polls, which are actually pretty stout, especially heading with a week to go for the election. If you look at their own polls, they're terrible. People actually, if you call it the fake news or the left-leaning news, whatever you want to call it, they are not held in high esteem by the American people because they believe they have an agenda and they're dishonest about that agenda. And so they try to spin everything that happens in society, in this case, into Donald Trump's fault. He's responsible for everything that's going wrong in the country. The problem with that is that the polls show that the American people actually feel better about this country than they did in all the 8 years of Barack Obama. So we are on the right track, and they see the president is leading, and they don't believe these lies.
All right, let me ask all three of you. Michael, we'll start with you. Predictions. It's either going to be Republicans wins House, Senate, extra seats, split decision on the House and the Senate, or Democrats win. Prediction.
Sean, I've knocked hundreds and thousands of doors over the last year.
I'm not asking
that.
Give me the prediction.
Want results. They don't want resistance, period. And I think we're going to see Republican wins and Republican turnout. The red wave is coming.
What do you think, Sean Spicer?
Republicans pick up seats in the Senate. We have a 55-seat majority. We maintain a 2-vote majority in the House, maintain both houses.
What do you think, Matt? 3 seats in the Senate or more, and I think it's a coin flip on the House. It's getting better for Republicans every day.
I say Republicans pick up at least 3 in the Senate, and if the vote were today, I say they're down 5, and that Pelosi's winning as of now. That means people have to get out to vote. All right, thank you all. When we come back, President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, traveling to Pittsburgh tomorrow. Kristen Fisher will join us from the White House with a full report. And over 5,000 troops, as of today, headed to the border. Jason Chaffetz, Sarah Carter react. A lot more news as Hannity continues. With the very latest on the president's upcoming visit to Pittsburgh tomorrow, as well as an update. The president sending troops to our border. Fox News Washington correspondent Kristen Fisher tonight. Kristen.
Well, Sean, President Trump says that he's going to Pennsylvania tomorrow to really grieve with the Pittsburgh community. He has been welcomed by the rabbi at the Tree of Life Synagogue, which is where this deadly attack took place. But there are also about a dozen other Jewish leaders from a national organization for progressive Jews who are saying that President Trump is not welcome in their city until he fully denounces white nationalism. Well, tonight, in an interview airing in about 30 minutes, Fox's Laura Ingraham asked President Trump if he'd like to clarify what being a nationalist means to him. Here's what he said.
To me, I don't have to clarify. It means I love the country. It means I'm fighting for the country. I look at 2 things, globalists and nationalists. I'm somebody that wants to take care of our country because for many, many years, you know this better than anybody, our leaders have been more worried about the world than they have about the United States.
Now, she also asked him why he decided to take the rare step of sending more than 5,000 active duty military members to the southern border when he's already deployed the National Guard, which is something that both Presidents Bush and Obama did to little effect.
Then I'm sending up the military. This is the military. And they're standing there. And one thing that will happen.
No lethal force.
When they're captured, we don't let them out. What has been happening, and we're not as of pretty recently, we're not letting them out. What happens is they would catch and release. We're catching. We're not releasing.
Now, the White House is also considering some kind of executive or regulatory action. One idea that's being tossed around is to only allow migrants to make asylum claims at official ports of entry, which means that any migrants who cross the border illegally would not be able to claim asylum in the United States. Now, Sean, that is an option that is still being considered. It is still on the table being considered by the White House tonight. But that decision to send the military to the border, that is already happening, Sean.
All right, Kristen Fisher in our nation's capital tonight at the White House. Thank you. Joining us now with reaction, the author of the book, The Deep State, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, also Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. She just returned from Guatemala for an independent investigation into the caravan. Sarah, I'm assuming that 99% of those people, you know, estimates anywhere from 5 to 7 to 14,000. Some seem to think that the crowd has gone down in size a little bit. I'm assuming 99.8% are good people that want a better life for themselves and their families, but there is nobody on television that can vouch for any one person there. You reported that you ran into people with MS-13 tattoos on, and the danger is we're a nation of laws. Our sovereignty needs to be respected, as well as our Constitution, and you have to do it legally.
Well, absolutely, Sean. And when you look at, being there in Guatemala and being there when the second wave of the members of the caravan were coming through, I mean, the majority were over 1,500 men. I'm not saying that, the people there shouldn't be trusted or aren't suffering. What we're saying is that we don't know who these people are. They're coming across the border. The majority of them were men. Like I reported, some of them were former or current MS-13 gang members. They had tattoos to show it. Some of them were very young. I asked a lot of the men who were of family age, where's your families? Where's your wives? Where are your children? Some of them said, well, they're in the front of the line. They went ahead of us. Others said, well, they're back home. We're coming to look for work. We expect to find jobs. This is a very dangerous situation, Sean. Remember, nobody crosses through Mexico to the United States border without paying the drug cartels. The drug cartels and the narco traffickers own all the routes into the United States. These people are in a very precarious, dangerous situation. They're coming to the U.S. border, and I think the president is sending a direct message to Central America, to the Central American governments. Take care of your people. Make sure that they are safe in their homelands, and stop this migration from coming forward. When he sends the troops to the border, he's sending that message. And I've been told that that message is being well received, not by all, but for example, the Guatemalan government has turned back people. The Mexican government has asked people to return home too.
And as Mexico should have stopped this from day one. They did not. You know, if you look at Podesta, Congressman, John Podesta, Center for American Progress, they're telling Democrats, just get off of immigration. Don't talk about it. The silence of the left has been deafening here. Similarly, Maxine Waters even said, they keep telling her, don't talk about impeach 45. Let's keep it secret. Then we got Phil Bredesen, candidate from Tennessee, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, and now Kristen Sinema, all saying one thing privately caught on tape, that we're acting like moderates, but we're really left-wing Schumer supporters. The Democrats can't tell the American people what they want to do. So they've got to basically, they have a strategy of lying with 8 days to go until the midterms.
That's right. They don't have the policies that America agrees with. On immigration, they don't have a single bill that they can point to that they're supportive of. They want to abolish the Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE. They don't want a wall. Some of them want to take down the existing wall. They are encouraging what is essentially human trafficking. Let's call it what it is. If you're taking people from Honduras and Guatemala and who knows what other countries north through Mexico, that is human trafficking. You would think that somebody on the Democratic side of the aisle would stand up and say, enough is enough, we're not going to do that. But they want that gavel so bad. They want Maxine Waters to be the chairman of financial services. They want to make sure that Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and I think they're willing to do anything they can to get there.
Well, I think that's what the media now, why they've ratcheted up the way they have. I mean, what they've been doing to the president over this horrific, evil synagogue shooting and blaming him. The guy that shot up the place hates him, in part because of his strong support for our closest allies, our friends Israel. All right, thank you both. When we come back, 8 days to go until the crucial midterms. Things are tight in Florida. Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, they will join us next. Straight ahead.
Synagogue about whether Trump was welcome there. I think we have that. I'm talking slow enough so you can set it up. Would that work?
President Trump has talked about coming to Pittsburgh and coming to your synagogue in the aftermath of this. Do you want him to come?
The President of the United States is always welcome. I'm a citizen. He's my president. He's certainly welcome.
There you go. Kilmeade, what are your thoughts on what, if you care to respond to Juan about his feelings?
I don't know any of those groups.
Okay.
I don't know any of those groups, but it sounds like Democratic talking points. Sounds like something Tom Steyer said on CNN on Sunday, who I didn't ever say talk besides the ads that he bought and the money he made. I was just stunned. If you asked me when this happened, first the bombers discovered to the shooting at the synagogue, I thought maybe by Sunday, on a Sunday show, some pundit looking to get a network contract would go ahead and say, I think the president's to blame. I did not know the same night, the same day, within an hour, they said, ha, look at what you see. What the president does, and it works to his detriment, is he watched everybody talk about all this. And it had him seething, as if we were sitting outside the glass listening to the five talk about us. For him, he's listening to this, and he's outraged. So what does the president do? Exactly what he did his entire life at the Trump Organization, as a candidate and as a president. I'm going to go tweet out, I'm going to speak out. You guys are blaming me for this. You're making it worse. The way you treat me has my 60 million who voted for me and maybe more seething, ready to go. Now, that has nothing to do with that lunatic in Florida and that nutcase in Pittsburgh. But I do think that there's a sense out there that Trump and his supporters have been categorized like as white nationalists because they voted for him, and they're tired of it, and he's speaking for them.
I don't think it's about voting for him. I think that if you look back at some of the actions, not only the bomber and then the shooter, but I mean, go back to Charlottesville, Proud Boys, and all this kind of stuff, that there's a growing white nationalist rage in this country, and people are like, whoa.
You do realize, though, that President Trump's daughter is Jewish. His son-in-law is Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. I actually think President Trump has a special spot in his heart for the Jewish community. You see that in his actions as well, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, being the first sitting president to visit the Western Wall. So I think that is often not talked about in this national dialogue is the fact that this is so close to the president.
One of the things, Lisa, that really bugged me about Charlottesville, everybody put it in terms of the Confederate statues, black, white, but you know, they had guys with tiki torches and automatic weapons standing outside a synagogue so the Jewish people had to exit through the back door. And those same guys said, oh, what a shame that Mr. Trump would allow his beautiful daughter to marry a Jew.
They were universally condemned.
Let me get Dana in here. The media, oddly enough, didn't mind Louis Farrakhan's tweets earlier this week where he compared Jews to termites, but we'll not go there. You had Andrew McCarthy on your show, and I made a really important point that back in the 70s, the United States was a much smaller country. I don't know how many by millions, but had many, many more of these kinds of attacks. So
and in fact, it was the New York Times yesterday had this amazing report. It was like it was on their website, like really well done. I'd point anyone to it. It was actually talking about 1968 because it was the 50th anniversary, and we're looking at this now that in 1968 just how divisive things were. I do think we all have to keep in mind that keeping a red line between speech and violence is really important. That's how America was founded.
Exactly.
I also feel like the president could figure out a way to read the room a little better, and that means like the country, right? Like take a couple minutes, like tap the brakes just a little bit, because for better or worse, people tend to look up to leaders. And they want to feel better about the moment. And if the moment becomes about him and the media's treatment of him, then we're just right back down into it. And then somebody's going to have to step forward and do something. Can I just add one last thing?
Sure.
I know we got to go. And that is the issue of radicalization of people. We talked about this a lot during the War on Terror. How does it happen, right? Well, you have hopeless people, purposeless people, people who are ignorant, and then they find purpose in something that they find somewhere now is online. So if you have radical Islamists, how do they find it? And there's something there's something. I don't necessarily think it's speech, but there is a culmination of it. And if you look at this guy's background, Boyer's background, he certainly had it, right? He turned evil and vile into violence. And what we should be talking about is what the president said is, I'll do everything in my power to stop it from happening again. Okay, so what is in your power to do? And that's some pretty uncomfortable conversations about privacy and the ability we can prosecute very well. What we